they did not research how to make a nice wool fed using sheep wool. So, in other words, they would not have had a lightweight hat. And why also mentioning why the modern ballers often do not feel the same with the modern stiff hats, because I explained that they do not have a different process for the soft felt versus the stiff felt. Now, because stiff felt hats stopped being worn in the 1960s, they cut down the plants and only made for soft felt hats. And when somebody wants a stiff felt hat, what they do is they add more stiffener. But the entire process should have been different from the start, because what it does is, when they did the stiff felt, they actually put less felt but more stiffener in the very process of creating the felt. And thus, initially they did not really know how to do that, and thus the early Victorian to mid-Victorian pattern for most hats, but in the US they started doing that in the mid-Victorian period, probably from the second industrial revolution, so from the mid-1850s. But in Europe into the 1870s, felt hats, or at least in the 1850s, usually, as I understand it, history, they were actually all made the same, but then they added more stiffener for stiffer ones. And the problem is always the same. Too heavy, too bulky, too warm, because now they have even more stiffener, especially for higher top hats and all, high hats, or wider brimmed hats. And eventually, very quickly, especially with the rain, or when steaming, and the stiffener gets lost. So in the US, they developed how to make the felt by itself stiff, by really making the wool, the chopped off wool, into a stiff felt, from making it stiff from when it was condensed, and not doing it as a separate step afterwards like they did for softer hats, whereby it will still use stiffeners, but the small amounts they only add it in the end. That is the way it should be done. For soft, we call them soft felt hats, or mid-weight, mid-stiff hats. And also they tried to make lighter and lighter hats that yet were very stiff and so were very crisp. By probably the 1870s in the US, they managed to do it even with sheep wool, which was not quite as cheap in price than the sheep wool back in Europe, whereby they did not put a lot of attention in sheep wool. Usually sheep wool hats were only for soft hats. The original fedora, that was not called fedora, they were only working classes and perhaps the middle classes wore when they did not want a cap. They wanted something a bit more formal, but they wanted a malleable hat that was not stiff, so they could fold it and put it in their pockets as when they started working in the factories and all, and reshape it in different, like maybe make it into a round shape or crease it and more. And it was less expensive, and so they would have a sheep wool, not beaver or whatever, for such a hat, because they would not be able to afford it anyhow. And be careful with the hat. So this is not a sheep hat, and it's not sheep wool, as in a bear. It's probably more a rabbit. But it is not like in the 1890s. In the 1890s, would have a longer brim, right? And most likely at least that much of a hatband, but especially a more curled up brim. So it has to be longer and curled up, or at least more curled. If you just wanted more curled, there is a way to do it. But you have to know is, first of all, your I call these round hats, round hat, American or European, because a lot of, as I understand it, some American hats, and I find this is the better way, this is like the original ball, whatever, is made like the fedoras and whatever. It's actually made from one wool hat coat. But this one is French, and see, this feels a tad stiffer and especially denser than the crown, because this is a separate Goth hammer thing. So there's one ply of Goth hammer, or two maybe, I think only one, and then they put one ply of stiff felt here and one ply of stiff felt there, and then the same stiff felt stands by its own for the crown. So if you stiffen that with steam, I will put in the end screen, check his videos, absolutely great, Hats and Guitars by Kevin Todd. He teaches how to do it. He does not know anything about the gas hammer, so he teaches how to reshape hats that are made using one-wall ply, right, for the brim, and even that is difficult for the brim. You cannot do it with steam there. You would delaminate the ply from the felt to the gas hammer. So what you must do is first you must take a pattern for a hat like that. For one which you have established is one-wall piece of felt, check the Kevin Todd videos on how to reshape brims. Okay? And I teach you for that one. For that one, you take, so you do, the first step is the same. You brush it, then all that hair, you take a lot of tape, you tap it, make sure the hat is dry. I've not been wetting it, even if you need to not wet it for at least a week to make sure it's completely dry. Then you tape it, take away all the dust, put some stiffener, do not get the, I tried with the hairspray, he tells you to do the hairspray, no, get some proper stiffener on Amazon or eBay. The best one would be Manhattan, but it will not deliver out of the US, so if you're not in the US, you can't get it. So then, you spray. You would have to spray a lot, I think, on there. Oh no, because it is already stiff. Oh no, right, forget it. For golf hammer thing, no stiffener required. No stiffener, right? You wet it with a sponge, or, yeah, you wet it a lot. It's to be wet. What some people call damp, so not dripping, but wet, just before dripping. Then you will press, and as you press, and you iron it, so you put a cloth. You take a non-steam iron, you cut, ideally like the iron I use for ironing, which is a heavyweight in a 2.5 kilogram Panasonic dry iron. You put a cloth, a thin cloth, like a gas hammer cloth, that is not like a calico cloth, yeah. And you iron, and you try to bend it, to change it, to make it like that. This will make it a billion times more accurate. If you try to get a bit of lesson, they call these borders or derbies. I call them a derby. So like a derby, the Americans a derby. Now, I talk British English, clearly, so why do I not call it a baller? Because it is not a baller! I know people call it a baller, but it is not a baller. What is the difference between any round hat and a baller or derby? The difference is, in 1846, they had round hats, alright, but they were wearing what I call square hats, what people call top hats, riding top hats, with a man called John Coke, C-O-K-E, and he had a big property, and there were poachers stealing game, right? Poor animal that is killing them in the land. So he had his guards protecting it, but the poachers were throwing stones at them, and often when riding, they would not wear the top hat because it would get caught into branches, and they could get killed. They would get the rabbit neck shot, it's called. So they would just take it off and just wear the cap, and they got hurt from the stones, the projectiles were thrown. So he asked Hat and Co, Lock and Co, I think it was, I want a riding hat, so it has to be worn high. Why? So and not with a strap on, this is a crash weight for competitions, but a riding through a forest with trees and branches, it must be worn high up. Why? So when one hits a branch, it protects one from dying or getting knocked off. But the hat must be knocked away so it does not get caught and do that rabbit shot thing. So it must be worn high, like the Jewish Irish hats. They wear them high. I think the Jews do it because they wear those piots, the Hasidic Jews. So at one point I had pigtails, like Viking pigtails, and not the part thing. The part is there, but I had the pigtails here. So through here it is more impractical to wear a deep hat, but I guess that because some Jews wear the part thing high up there, I guess this is the reason for which they wear their Irish hats high up there. But anyhow, it is worn very high, right? Not high like they used to wear these hats, they used to wear them about. Now they are worn here, back then they were worn there, but no, they are worn here, right? Very high. So it has to be worn very high, very small brim, so there's a lot of vision, but a very dense one to protect from the branch and all the projectile. And a round surface, he created that so that it will flow away when